Guys, it is Sunday. I hope that everyone is having an amazing Memorial Day weekend. We've got a long weekend. I hope that everyone is relaxing and hopefully spending good time with friends and family. Today, I'm excited to be talking about some vintage baseball cards. It's kind of underserved, I feel like, in some ways, especially when I was at the Dallas Card Show last week. I just noticed there was not near as much vintage as I thought that there would be. I have an appreciation for vintage cards in general, and so I wanted to make sure that I'm putting out content that's not just modern. There's also vintage stuff. I do talk about vintage cards on this channel, but vintage baseball cards is something I don't talk about enough. And while I don't own a lot of vintage baseball cards, I really appreciate the history behind them and do plan on having some in my collection moving forward. I'm just pulled in many different directions with my collection. Today, we are going to talk about 6 key vintage baseball cards. Obviously, can't cover all of them in one video. There are so many great vintage baseball cards to talk about, but I picked out 6. And what I did is I went on the Card Ladder data tool. I used both Market Movers and Card Ladder data tools to give me kind of a snapshot of what pricing looks like for any particular card or the cards that are in their database. And so what I did is I ran a search at $500 or higher for baseball, and I just kind of went down that list and found some of those great cards. And that's how we're going to talk about it today. The thing to remember is, as great as data tools are, they are really kind of looking at eBay sales, which not taking into account, private transactions, card show deals, social media transactions, whether it be on Facebook Marketplace or Twitter or IG. So it gives you kind of a picture, but you don't have the whole picture. So just keep that in mind. But it does give kind of an overview as to what pricing looks like. And so it's valuable for me, and that's how I'm able to kind of quickly see where pricing is on any particular card that's within their database. All right, guys, let's kick it off with the 1955 Sandy Koufax Topps rookie card. Unbelievable card. Obviously, if you are a baseball card collector or just a sports card collector in general, you've probably seen this one before. Again, it's from the 50s, so it's very difficult to see these in a high grade. And so I picked out PSA 3 is the one that had popped up on the search, and so I just went with that one just to kind of offer a few different price points. But for a PSA 3, you're at population 811, and you'll see kind of a reoccurring theme on this as to how kind of underpriced sports cards were going back. The data goes back in Card Ladder for this particular card to 2004. So from 2004 to 2020, this card pretty much all day was $100 to $350 in that particular range. Going for 16 years, it was in that range. Now, in September, it had jumped up. That's kind of when it started to move upward, is 2020. March 2020 onward is really when that started to move. To give an idea, September 15th, it was at $860. March 6th, so just a couple months ago, it had come up to $1,647. And now it currently sits at about $1,000. And so I do bring that up because there's so many different factions. There's so many different niches within sports card buying, selling, collecting, investing, that although, yes, prices are currently down for certain cards, it just kind of shows you, though, if you were looking at historical data, that, stuff was a lot less if we're just going back a few years. So I wanted to share that. So that's kind of where we are right now for a PSA 3 Sandy Koufax rookie card. All right, next up, 1963 Topps Rookie Stars Pete Rose rookie. Are they going to let this guy in the Hall of Fame or what? Is it going to happen, baseball fans? Should it happen? Should it not happen? I'm probably opening up a massive can of worms by bringing that up, but because it's a polarizing opinion, it seems like. Although I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like people have become a little bit more lax on Pete Rose over the last few years, and a lot more people do want to see him inducted into the Hall of Fame. But let me know. All right, so PSA 4 for this card pops 679. If we go back again, 2004 to December 2019, the range is right in the $200 to $500 range fairly consistently. As of August, end of August, it had moved up to about $815. In November, $1,267. And this one currently I'm showing, it did go up in March to $1,950 roughly, and has currently kind of come down a little bit right in that $1,500 range. Great card, iconic baseball card. I know iconic is thrown around so much within sports cards, but these are iconic cards. They're just awesome. And I just like kind of too how they were designed. It's a piece of history. These cards are more than just, the players that are on the cards. These are historical artifacts is the way that I look at them, whether it be vintage baseball cards, basketball cards, football cards, and the like. I mean, they're just awesome. All right, next, a little bit newer of a card. Some would say this is fringe vintage. 1975 Topps George Brett in a PSA 8. I just love the coloring on this card. It's got kind of that blue, the blue-green bordering is really, really nice. And George Brett, one of the best hitters of all time. Population for this card is 2,770 in a PSA 8. And again, from 2004 to December of 2020, not that long ago, it's $100, $90 to $580 card. That's kind of a broad range, but it gives you an idea of kind of the growth pattern between 2004 and 2020, into 2020. January, it's moved up to $775. In May, it was $1,000, roughly $1,025, and then now it sits at about $720. And so we'll see what happens. But again, I think that's where, when people kind of question how come there maybe has been a slowdown, it's just that it moved up very, very quickly between December and February. Sports cards got another jolt but over that time. And what's funny is I remember looking at graphs to where you see kind of that July-August movement upwards for cards, and then it kind of faded downwards if we look at November, December, and then end of December through February, it really started to move. And then, of course, we've seen kind of a moveward down over the last few months. So it's kind of having this hill effect, over the last little bit, to where it has rocketed up. It's come back down some. It's moved up a little bit. It's kind of just dinking and dunking, dancing along. But very interesting to watch that. Next, 1954 Topps Ernie Banks, the legendary Cubs player, in a PSA 3. Great card again. I love the design of these 50s cards, and just having one, even in a lower grade, I am not against. I do the same thing when I'm buying comic books. I'll buy, Tales of Suspense, early X-Men, early stuff, and it's in a CGC 3 or a CGC 4.0. I'm okay with lower grade stuff with important items, with important books, because you just see what happens when the pricing gets out of whack very quickly on the higher end grades. And so, for me, I just want to own it. And I do think that there is a little bit, I think there can be a trickle down effect. If the PSA 10 goes for X and the PSA 9 moves up with it, if you happen to have a PSA 3, PSA 4, PSA 5, the trends recently have shown kind of a movement upward along with those. So for me, I just want to own the important stuff. And if it means that it's a lower grade, then that means it's a lower grade. It just is what it is. So Ernie Banks, rookie card, 54 Topps from 2004 to March 8th of 2020, $150 to a $350 card pretty much all day. December of 2020, it's moved up to $850. And then February, there was actually a sale that went over $2,000, a big sale at the end of February. And then it's come back down. Right now, it's a little bit under $1,000 or right around $1,000. But again, just an awesome card. Okay, let's talk about Willie Mays, 51 Bowman Willie Mays, a PSA 2.5. And again, you kind of get into these 0.5 lower grades because there's just not a lot of these cards exchanging hands. There's not a lot of sales on these cards. The pop for a 2.5 is 55. From 2012 to November 2020, you're seeing it anywhere from $815 to $2,800. In March, it goes up to $8,600 this year, March of 2021. April, it comes back down to $7,200. In May, it went up to $11,000, and then currently there was a sale right around $10,000. So you'll see that this is kind of what happens when you get into the more scarce stuff where there's just not sales, is you will see pricing like this that's kind of all over the place because, this card might sell once a year. There might just not be that many that are out there that are on the market. A lot of big time vintage baseball collectors that are not interested in selling their stuff is just going right into the PC. You hear about these stories. I report on these stories of these old collections of vintage baseball cards that are unearthed. 70, 80, 90-year-old people that have had these collections forever. And so that's one thing with vintage sports cards, vintage comic books. There's a deep collector base there. These are not, yes, there is investor money that comes in, but not as much flipping in this market. Some flipping, but it is more of a long-term hold play from what I've seen and from what I've heard talking to other hobbyists and talking to other people that are operating in this market. Okay, last but certainly not least, it's a huge card. It's a 1968 Topps Nolan Ryan rookie card. It's Nolan Ryan and Jerry Koosman on this card. In a PSA 5, you've got population 1,977. And again, 2004 to what? About 2004 to October 2020. It's a $200 card to about $650, $690 card. Up until October of last year, it did move up in January to $1,200 and then reached its current peak at the end of February at $2,400. And now it's come down to, it's right at about $1,500 to $1,750. There was a sale at the end of March right around $1,299, $1,300. So possible to get this card, now in that $1,300 to $1,750 range is kind of where it's been. But I think that, again, it's kind of the question mark, I think, for people is there room to move downward? And that's where we kind of see, a lot of the talk is, we've seen where these cards were priced and recognizably very underpriced for a lot of these cards. And now we've kind of seen them move upward. And I think people are trying to see, okay, is there room for this to come down further? And that might be a little bit of the hesitation with buying right now, is just kind of seeing, where it stops. Where does that downward movement stop, and then kind of going from there. It's interesting to watch, though, the kind of the psychology behind it. It's really fun. It's fun. So, guys, what do you think about vintage baseball cards? I know a lot of people just say, this is kind of a boring play. It doesn't really move much, but you can see that there's movement on these cards, especially over the last few years. Do you think that we have kind of hit more of a bottom on these particular to where these will start moving back up again? Or do you think there's more room to come down on these types of cards? With the modern cards, it's very easy to say, like, look, there's overproduction, there's this, that, or whatever. With these older cards, they are more scarce. There's a deep collector base. There's added variables with vintage sports cards that make it a little bit different. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are you buying, selling vintage stuff? Are you holding off? Are you a longtime collector of it? I want to hear what your deal is. I want to mix it up in the comments, talk about it. So, guys, have an amazing Sunday. I hope that everyone is having a good time and staying healthy. Enjoy your family and your friends, and I will catch you next time. Take care.